Have you ever thought that a single morning could change the fate of an entire nation? In August 2025, on the dusty red roads of Ouagadougou, the small capital of Burkina Faso, people suddenly heard a strange sound. It wasn't the rattling of old trucks they were used to. This was deeper, heavier, steady, like the footsteps of an iron beast. When they looked up, the city froze. Convoys of modern armored vehicles, self-propelled mortars and rocket launchers rolled into military bases. But what shocked everyone was not just their size or power, it was their origin. They were not from France. They carried no American flags. They came from China. For many outsiders, it was just another weapons shipment. But for Burkina Faso, for soldiers who had fought with rusty rifles and beaten-up pickup trucks, this was hope. Hope that villages could be defended. Hope that their army could stand tall again. And above all, hope that their nation could finally choose its own path. This is not just a story about tanks or rockets. It's a story about choice and survival. About how a small nation dared to pivot in the middle of a global power struggle. And it's also about Africa itself, a continent quietly rewriting its destiny. For nearly a decade, Burkina Faso has lived in fear. Villages burned, millions displaced, and an exhausted army pushed to the brink. But why did this small nation become the battlefield for some of the world's most dangerous militant groups? Since 2015, Burkina Faso has been caught in a spiral of violence. Armed groups linked to Al-Qaeda and ISIS spread across the Sahel, torching villages in the north and east, driving communities from their homes. By 2024, nearly 2 million people had been displaced, making Burkina Faso one of Africa's worst humanitarian crises. The army was collapsing under the pressure. Its weapons were outdated. Rusty Kalashnikovs, a handful of old armored carriers, and scattered artillery. Supply convoys became easy prey for ambushes. Militants on motorbikes or pickup trucks struck quickly and disappeared into the bush. Soldiers had no way to chase them. Morale plummeted. Many felt abandoned, fighting a war they could never win. To the outside world, Burkina Faso was turning into a failed state, swallowed by insurgency and despair. Then, one sweltering morning in August 2025, the roar of Chinese armored convoys filled the air. For soldiers, it wasn't just steel and firepower. It was a message. We still have a chance. For years, Burkina Faso placed its survival in the hands of France and the United States. But when the crisis reached its peak, those allies pulled back. Why did the West abandon the Sahel at the moment of greatest need? For decades, France was Burkina Faso's security guarantor. Thousands of French troops were stationed in the Sahel under Operation Barkhane. Paris trained officers, supplied weapons, and dictated strategy. But after more than 10 years, stability never came. Terrorist attacks only grew worse. People began asking, if France is here but we're still unsafe, then why is France here at all? Anger exploded into the streets. Tens of thousands protested, accusing Paris of acting like a colonial overlord. Finally, in 2022, French troops were expelled from Ouagadougou. A chapter closed. The United States was different, but no better. Washington's focus was global counterterrorism, not the survival of Burkina Faso itself. It provided intelligence, drones, and some training, but always with strings attached. Demands for democracy, financial transparency, human rights oversight. For a government fighting daily insurgent attacks, these conditions felt like luxuries it couldn't afford. The people saw it clearly. When Burkina Faso needed help the most, the West hesitated, talking much, delivering little. And into that silence, another power stepped forward, China.
And then, into that vacuum, China arrived. Not with lectures about democracy, not with complicated conditions, but with one thing: weapons. Could this be salvation? Or just a new chain slowly tightening around Burkina Faso?
When the first Chinese VN-22B armored vehicles rolled into camp, many Burkinabe soldiers were speechless. They had never seen anything like it. VN-22B, a six-wheeled armored carrier, resistant to armor-piercing rounds, armed with a 30mm autocannon and modern fire control systems. On the rough roads of the Sahel, it could fire accurately even while moving, something their old pickup trucks could never do. PLL-05, a 120mm self-propelled mortar, able to strike targets indirectly like artillery or directly like a light tank. Commanders could shift tactics instantly on the battlefield. SR-5, a multiple rocket launcher system, striking up to 70 kilometers away, capable of launching both unguided and precision-guided rockets. Hideouts once considered safe were suddenly within reach. This was more than a firepower upgrade. It was a psychological transformation. For the first time in years, soldiers felt they could fight back. Civilians saw proof that the government was not powerless. And Beijing didn't just ship hardware. Chinese engineers, trainers, and advisors followed. The message was clear. These weapons were not trophies. They were meant to be used. But every gun, every rocket, carried a hidden contract. Spare parts, ammunition, and training would all come from China. The deeper Burkina Faso integrated these systems, the harder it would be to turn away. This was Beijing's long game. Turn arms deals into binding relationships, not for 1 year, but for decades. Rocket launchers, armored carriers, heavy artillery. They all look impressive. But behind the spectacle lies a bigger question. What price did Burkina Faso really pay for this arsenal? And what if the cost isn't just money, but the very future of the nation? Burkina Faso is one of the poorest countries in the world. With GDP per capita under $900, how could it afford a weapons package worth hundreds of millions of dollars? The answer? Resources for weapons deals, a model China has perfected across Africa. Burkina Faso is one of the continent's leading gold producers. Gold makes up more than 70% of its exports, the lifeline of its economy. Analysts believe Ouagadougou pledged future gold revenues in exchange for immediate weapons deliveries. The model isn't new. In Angola, China traded infrastructure for oil. In Congo, it exchanged railways and mines for cobalt. In Burkina Faso, gold became the collateral for rockets and armored vehicles. This brought quick relief, an army suddenly equipped to fight back. But it also carried the risk of a golden trap. If global prices fell or production dropped, the debt burden could crush the country, leaving Beijing with leverage over its future. For Captain IbrahimTraore's military government, the deal was not just about survival, it was also about politics. To soldiers, you will no longer fight with broken tools. To the people, the state is investing in your protection. To the West, we can survive without you. The weapons became a political stage as much as a military one. But that only sharpened the question. Had Burkina Faso truly bought freedom, or simply traded one master for another? Burkina Faso is not alone. Across the Sahel, a quiet revolution is underway. Mali turns to Russia. Niger looks to Turkey and China. And now, together, they form a new alliance. Could this be the birth of a multipolar Africa? Burkina Faso's choice was never just about a weapons shipment. It is part of a regional shift in power reshaping the Sahel. Mali. After expelling French troops, Bamako turned to Russia, relying on Wagner contractors for training and weapons. Niger. Following its 2023 coup, Niamey looked to Turkey and China, purchasing drones and modern arms. Burkina Faso. Now the Sahel's most visible outpost of Chinese influence. Together, the three countries established the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, pledging military and economic cooperation, and openly rejecting Western dominance. This reflects a broader trend, Africa moving away from the West's grip, entering a new multipolar era. Russia, China, and Turkey are all competing for influence. Military juntas in the Sahel are using this competition to gain options and leverage. For China, embedding Burkina Faso into its weapons supply chain is just the start. From arms, it can expand into mining, infrastructure, and technology, building an ecosystem of influence that is difficult to untangle. The question remains, is this truly liberation, or simply a different form of dependence under a new flag? The convoys of Chinese armored vehicles rolling through Burkina Faso were not just delivering weapons. They were delivering a symbol of a new era. An era where Africa is no longer the West's exclusive playground. An era where survival is tied to resource for weapons deals. an era where dusty villages in the Sahel become the front lines of global power struggles. Burkina Faso has staked its future on China. If it succeeds, it could become a model for an Africa that defines sovereignty on its own terms. If it fails, it will prove a harsher truth. Changing masters is easier than breaking free. And so the final question lingers. Is this liberation or just a new chain painted red? If this story made you think about Africa's future and the shifting balance of power shaping our world, share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more in-depth stories on the global transformations rewriting history today.